We're here. It's Mark and Pete.
Welcome to Colourful Conversations with Mark and Pete. Today's themes, we'll be talking about ethical companies.
And what is an ethical company? What makes a company specifically ethical? What do you mean by a company that does things right? It isn't a person. It doesn't have a personality. How can it be said to be ethical? Well, recently we heard Justin Welby talking about a company and saying that the Church of England, of which he is the famed Archbishop, needed to pull out of dealing with Wonga. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We got things wrong. I don't think I ever said I wanted to close down Rock Company. I said I wanted to compete effectively with them. It's got very personalised, and I don't work that way. We want to set up effective alternatives, particularly in areas of deprivation, which give a good flow of finance that enables the church not only to talk about loving people and loving communities because of Jesus Christ, but to demonstrate it in what we do. What went wrong was that it's a very complex world out there. £75,000 some years ago was invested very indirectly out of a portfolio of £3.5 billion and ended up invested in Wonga. It shouldn't have happened.
That was Justin Welby speaking in a recent media interview. But I guess the crucial point here is to establish the real foundation of this key subject, which is what is a truly ethical company?
Yes, what do you mean by being an ethical company? Or
Correct.
I guess an ethical organisation, because Justin Welby there, he's the Archbishop of Canterbury, so he's effectively the head of the Church of England. Now, he was concerned in that interview about trying to ensure that the Church of England was seen as an ethical organisation. He was assuming, in that interview anyway, that Wonga wasn't ethical. That
Yes.
was his assumption. And, so he's saying Wonga isn't ethical, therefore we won't work with them.
Yes. But
Does that make the Church of England ethical?
Yes.
Well, it makes it ethical in this sense, in that he had been campaigning against Wonga and similar companies which did bridge loans, took advantage of people. At least that's what he would say.
Yes, but I think that what we need to do is look at the wider picture here.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at what is an ethical company and benchmark either Wonga or anyone else for that matter, I think we need to define what is an ethical company. So essentially, is a truly ethical company one that, for example, doesn't cause damage to the environment, in some people's opinions?
Okay.
That is one measure. Or it could be, for example, does it exploit its workforce, for example, like paying low wages? And we've seen that in recent times, particularly in places like India, where there has been some exploitations with certain well-known clothing manufacturers.
Yeah, sure.
Or it could be, say, does a company, employ child labour? Or are the products that they produce harmful? So
Yes.
do they cause damage to people as well as the environment? So there has to be a set of criteria.
Now, those criteria that you just listed there, I mean, I guess people would agree that a company that caused damage to the environment, exploited its workforce, used child labour and produced products that are harmful, well, they're not ethical. But it's sort of a negative view. Negative? That's put the wrong false teeth in today.
Yes.
I blame these unethical manufacturers. I mean, making such both. Anyway.
Yes, you are
But I
made
just-
up of very, very, very strange components, I must admit.
Yes, but whether or not I'm ethically produced, companies being ethical, if you judge them by that sort of list of criteria you had there, you have a very negative measure in that you'll say, well, if a company, taking the opposite point of view, if a company doesn't cause damage to the environment, it doesn't exploit its workforce, it doesn't use child labour, and it doesn't produce products that are harmless, does that make it ethical? It's not a very positive view of ethics.
No,
You don't fall into these particular blunders.
No.
You haven't done those things.
But you
wrong.
don't necessarily have to compartmentalise it. So, for example, it's possible that you could say, well, does it promote certain values? So a lot of companies actually take a strong initiative to sort of echo the values of trust, good behaviour, or possibly even fairness and kindness.
Yeah.
So there are many people who sponsor a cause,
Yeah.
or whether that's locally or even globally.
Yeah.
Now, rather than it be specific to, say, environment or exploitation, and again, I understand that this particular topic is often very difficult to measure, but for most people, if you judge a company's performance, you have to judge it against certain values. And clearly, we have certain measures. We see as something as being moral. We see as something as adding value rather than exploitation. So I think it is clear how a company... So take Justin Welby's point of view.
Yes.
His view was, in my opinion, ultimately that Wonga was exploiting those who had the need for money.
Yes.
And that was deemed to be immoral.
Yeah, the immorality wasn't in providing a loan. The immorality was in the way it promoted itself.
Yes.
So it was taking people's custom who may not have needed it or maybe couldn't afford it, and
Yes.
taking their custom anyway. And also, once it had them as a customer, it was unethically overcharging by having large
Yes.
or high rather,
Exorbitant fees.
rates for them to pay back. The issue there was in being an ethical company was was I suppose you could say, if you go through the list that you just read out from our crib sheet here, does it produce products that are harmful?
Well, it does produce a product.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what it is.
Well,
it's a harmful product
Yeah.
in that it's
Okay, they're not producing
the
some
interest is
plastic
too high.
widget
No, but
that's
it's harmful in that the
fallen
interest-
out of your head. But the fact is they are producing a product, or in this particular case, a service, although they may describe it as a product, which actually is damaging. If you think about it, for most people who, in today's society, particularly in Britain, who are struggling to pay their way in life with exorbitant fuel bills, with exorbitant increases in food costs, etc., some people have to turn to the next measure. And if Wonga recognises that this is one way of gaining significant profit, they're exploiting that situation. Hence, is that an ethical company? And I think that the answer, like Justin Welby, is no.
No, it's not. And there is another side to it. Not simply that the product itself is bad, the financial product is bad, and has harmful effects, but it's mis-selling of that product.
Yes.
So that's perhaps something else from our our notes we made from discussion on this subject we had off air. We looked at different areas, but I think we can sort of extend what we said. So it's a harmful product, and also it could be a good product that is missold. That's still an unethical company.
And to that point, if I were to extend it slightly wider, and that is that if you look at the way that banks have performed, albeit that not necessarily saying that it's a payday lender company, but banks have been guilty of exploiting the public by not being clear on the products that they're selling or services that they're selling. And there is a similar issue that has certainly affected people throughout the whole of not just Britain, but throughout the world. So Justin's point, I don't think really is necessarily targeted at Wonga alone. I think he's using them as an example.
Yeah. Yes. It was a whole class of companies that behaved in that way. So now let's move on. I think then to talking about companies positively trying to engender values of good behaviour, values of fairness, values of kindness.
Yes.
Now, one of the areas that companies try and make strides in this and will report on themselves saying we're doing well in this area would be to have a low carbon footprint.
Yes.
So they're trying to burn less fuels, trying to use local produce.
Yes.
And you do find some supermarkets promoting the fact that they sell local produce, or a restaurant that uses local produce, for example, a small company.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
But they may well have a hit there. In other words, a local company would find it easier, a small local company would find it easier to have a small carbon footprint. So that's a way that a local company can outperform in terms of ethics more easily a larger company.
Yes. Well, if I look at both sides of the equation, on the one hand, it does make sense that you would want to nurture the local communities with the businesses that can provide, for example, farm produce, and that makes sense. Why would you want to ship apples, etc., from all the way around the world when really you should be able to get them only a few miles down the road?
Yes,
but at the same time, it's also about availability.
Yes.
If the local community cannot actually provide that, you have no choice. Your carbon footprint is going to be extended because simply products are not available.
But I mean, this idea of the carbon footprint, now I brought that up because it is a measure that people use.
Yes.
And it is widely used, and it's encouraged by governments, by national governments, by the EU, to try and reduce your carbon footprint. So it's almost as if this is a measure of ethics that it wasn't around a few years ago. It's a sort of the new ethics, if you like. You must reduce your carbon footprint. What else would companies try and strive towards to show that they're ethical?
Well, I mean, if you look at about savings, etc., I
Okay.
mean, there are a lot of other companies that are also looking to try and reduce their energy costs. So, okay, there's carbon, but there's also extended to that. If you think of the amount of fuel that people use, and that's in itself, a huge topic in terms of being able to reduce the amount of energy that they're expending throughout the world, just simply. To either recycle or to be able to provide their own businesses with more economical ways of doing business. So, as we know, I mean, there's been a lot of initiatives in the housing market to use more solar paneling. At the moment, is solar paneling a good thing? Because it costs a lot of money to actually implement them to houses. Not everybody sees the return on investment quickly. So, are we being ethical as citizens by simply not taking up these initiatives? So I guess that's another example of, are we being ethical as individuals, let alone companies? We have to look at it that way.
Yeah, and yes, I think so. We should say that in order to have an ethical company, you really need to have ethical customers.
Correct.
That is the problem. Now, there's a reason for me mentioning this. Honestly,
I'm glad there is a point.
Yes, and I haven't told you what it is yet, but I'm going to. And that is, I went to see the Lego Movie recently. Now,
of which I have not seen.
No, but it's an excellent movie, and some of I think that the standard of acting is higher than a lot of Hollywood blockbusters you see.
Yes.
Certainly not wooden at all, more plastic.
Yes.
Now, Lego, the Lego Movie has a song which I'll sing for you now. That's famous.
Dear.
3, 2. No, I've changed my mind.
Yes, thank goodness.
So you can rest at ease, humble listener, gentle listener. Sorry, that I'm not going to be singing, but
that's if they're still listening.
But this song, "Everything Is Awesome," is the sort of song that you end up singing despite yourself on the way out of the movie.
Well, I'm not
theatre.
familiar with this song,
and even I would say, even singing it, even if you hated the movie, the song is so catchy.
Yes.
Now, I love the movie, but the song is so catchy, it's terrible. You end up singing it, and it's like a hymn
as long
to
as
Big
it's not
Brother.
you singing.
So let's first of all let's have just to let you know and to remind the listeners who will no doubt have seen this movie many times. They're probably all fans of it. No. And we'll just play a brief clip of the original song, and I'm going to play a clip of another song which has a twist on it for a reason that has to do with ethical companies. So first, let's listen just briefly to a few seconds of "Everything Is Awesome."
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome when we live in our dream. Everything is better when we stick together.
Now, this is a version put out by Greenpeace. It's a slower.
Do you want me to
version
sing
of
it?
the
I
song.
thought it was very catchy.
Perhaps you could do that in our own time. Yes.
I thought this was my chance.
Well, Okay, tell you what, but do send in comments. We welcome comments to the show. Send in the comments. Mark, please don't sing.
Yes, okay.
Hashtag Mark
Yes,
don't
I'm just
sing.
about to type it in myself. Okay.
So this second version of Everything Is Awesome is sung in a slightly different mode. It's in a minor key and it's sung a bit slower. And this version was put out by Greenpeace. Let's just listen to a brief snatch.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome when you're living on a dream. Everything is better when we stick together.
So there we are. That song came with a video produced by Greenpeace. Everything Is Not Awesome. You can take a look at it on YouTube. But, Mark, you just saw that for the first time. What's your reaction to this this propaganda piece by Greenpeace against Shell? Really saying Shell is an unethical company. What's your reaction to just seeing it and hearing it for the first time?
Well, I mean, my first reaction is that the initial part of the video lured you in, and it was very amusing, very well produced. But I think,
I mean, what we saw, just in case the listeners haven't seen it yet and they're still listening, is we saw the Lego from the movie, sort of like it was from the movie, all the characters being drowned in oil, including some lovely polar bears, so being killed by the oil from Shell. Anyway, yeah, what's your reaction?
well, I think that they're pulling on the heartstrings in a very extreme emotional way, and then clearly they've used Shell as an example of an exploration and production company, just simply to highlight, in their opinion, that such companies are actually being, in their view, environmentally pollutant. And the fact that they've used the iconography of Lego is really inappropriate, in my opinion, because they've distorted the facts.
Well, there is a link with Shell between
Of
Lego and
course.
Shell, but the question is Shell actually?
But it's how you tell the story.
Yes.
And what they've done is they've distorted the story. They've positioned the fact that, in their opinion, trying to echo to an audience that Shell has been unethical by pollutant, and they've had these unfortunate little children's toys being drowned in oil.
Yes.
Well, what they really haven't understood is that Shell, ironically, does have a very good track record on health and safety, on environmental issues, unlike maybe some of the other exploration and production companies. However, the point is that really the world and the likes of you and I need the likes of Shell. Basically, if you look at what they have been doing over the recent years, they have spent enormous amounts of money trying to find exploration of energy resources in a way that is safe for not only the company, but for the communities in which they're actually exploiting. The fact is that when any big energy company goes through these measures, this isn't a simple case of just turning up with rigging equipment and starting drilling. They work extensively with local governments, with authorities and bodies to exploit and explore what will be safe exploration to provide energy for, ironically, you and I, the generations of the future. And what really Greenpeace have tried to do is sensationalise by simply saying, well, look what this company is doing, it's putting us at risk. It isn't. The irony is, if we didn't have the likes of Shell, we would simply be a rather unprogressive society.
Yeah, so I agree with you that Shell has perhaps the best record of both preventing environmental damage and coping with it after it's happened.
The irony
they have
is,
a very good record.
Had they have used BP,
yes.
then I can understand that because of the issues that happened recently, then that would have probably made a bit more sense
Well,
to
they
their
were talking
campaign, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah. I mean, but Shell happened to have that link with Lego,
Of course.
But another point here I would say is that when you take a company like Shell and say that it's unethical, Another part that people say, the part that's often brought up, I don't see that Greenpeace are particularly doing it in this campaign, but it's often brought up, is that such companies are making huge profits from these methods. And so the implication is that they're, almost deliberately being careless so that they can make a greater profit.
Yeah.
Whereas that's unproven.
That's
an assertion.
Well, there's a bit of irony there because in today's market, ironically, exploration production, the margins on exploration production are extremely small than it was many years ago. In fact, the irony is that the margins and where the added value is more downstream when you produce things like refining, where you refine feedstock to produce chemicals, etc. But the crucial thing is, and I was going to point something out, that there is, in our measure of what is an ethical company, there's also what is deemed to be negative criteria. So, for example, the Ethical Investment Research Service, EIRS, produced a negative set of criteria. And it's interesting that some of the things that they bring out, a company, for example, who produces armaments, understandable, because clearly those are weapons of mass destruction or warfare. A company which produces tobacco or alcohol, that's debatable. But this is one that sort of ties into what we've been discussing. Companies which have a poor record on pollution control. Now, I think that is something that really needs to be looked at very carefully because, as I mentioned, particularly all of those energy companies, those big oil and gas companies, overall have a very good track record. I appreciate there have been some issues in recent times, but if you think of the amount of money that they spend, time and resource, improving technology, improving manpower, training across the board, whether that's through their engineers, their chemical engineers, whether that's through geographical and geology exploration, they have done an enormous job on building better measures to improve the safety and also impact on the environment. So I think that what Greenpeace have done is that they've probably really mistold the story, and I don't think that they're positioning it carefully.
And here I see a pattern, really, in the way that, I'm going to really generalise, the way that people, that's the ultimate generalisation, the way that people respond to different companies. Now, I'm going to give you two examples of a type of company. One, a big manufacturing company, which makes things, girders, we'll say, for reference. Yes. Just as an example, right? Okay, say for reference. I don't know why I said that. Say as an example, that's what I meant to say. So this girder making company, big company, uses a lot of oil and to power its engines. You gets rid of a lot of steam and hot water. And it does it in a responsible manner, but it's causing a bit of a mess wherever it lives. But it reduces.
Yes,
it reduces it as much as it can. You have another company, maybe bigger than that company, but what it does is produces computers, nice, neat little computers which have snazzy graphics on their screens. But this particular company may well be causing even more of a problem, maybe even more unethical. We don't know. We're not making a comment, but it makes nice, clean-looking things. One, when you look at it, it's big and smelly. That's the manufacturing company. And one is small and neat. That's the picture you have in your mind. Yes. I'm not talking about the reality.
It's a bit like you and I.
Yeah, yes. No, gentle listener, that is absolutely accurate, but I'm not going to say which is which because he gets embarrassed. Now, moving on. Those two different examples of companies, you can have, to give real examples, not girder making, but let's go back to oil. You can have Shell, and then you can have Apple, two companies. Which is the more ethical company? People will immediately think, Apple's a nice company, Shell is an unpleasant company, because Shell is one of those nasty petrochemical companies. It's a bias, it's a prejudice in the mind of people. Now, having said that, I'm wary of the fact that I'm just saying people as though everyone says it, but it is something I observe, that there seems to be a reaction against big companies, the big old-fashioned traditional companies which get resources or produce things, and the nice and neat little.
Well, of course,
modern
obviously,
software companies.
it's very difficult to put the two together
Yeah,
because they're
yeah,
in
yeah,
totally
sure,
different, two different markets. And not only that, Shell has been around a considerable longer period than Apple. But I think that again, it's about this point that we mentioned before, which is setting the criteria. You should benchmark any company against the criteria that we've said. Do they follow certain laws? Do they follow the ethics of being able to follow environmental standards that are set by a country, or even their own standards, for that matter, which increase year on year? And I think just simply saying let's benchmark Apple against Shell is a bit unfair. What you could do is you could say, how do each of these companies benchmark themselves against the criteria?
Yeah, absolutely.
That is.
Yeah.
But that's where I think that Greenpeace have gone wrong.
Yeah.
That what they should be saying is, here is our set of ethics. This is what we see as being the standard, the global standard. Do you, whether you are a small, a medium, or a large company, measure against this? And that is the way to judge it. Because otherwise you tell the story in a wrong way, and then you get a political distortion. And that is the way I think that people often fall into that trap. As long as you stick to your measure, then you'll be okay.
Well, we haven't talked much in this show about the treatment of the workforce, and I guess we're drawing to a close now in this show. But one of the reasons for that is that can be a show in its own right, to talk about how a company treats its workforce. How much should workers be paid? Should it be simply what the company wants to pay them? Should there be a minimum wage? How should there be a maximum wage, a maximum salary rather, that can be paid? These sort of things, these sort of issues demand a longer conversation than the few minutes we have left. But when we were talking about the criteria right at the start of this show, we did mention the workforce, not exploiting its workforce,
Yep.
particularly we mentioned by not paying low wages, and I think that is part of it. It's both what the company produces, how it relates to the outside world in the way that it makes things, and the customers how it treats the customers that it sells its products to, but also how it treats its own workforce. Ethics, an ethical company, encompasses all of that.
Well, that also comes back to this slightly broader and less specific criteria, which is fairness.
Yes.
What is deemed to be fair? So, as we know, that's been widely publicised in recent times in the media, minimum wage is something that the UK has adopted, and Germany has recently gone through that massive debate because they've recognised that what was deemed to be fair or unfair in their view, which was that the minimum wage was too low, it needed to be increased. The uproar was that this was going to cause businesses a lot of pain. The irony is that it probably would have caused them more pain if people couldn't survive and couldn't actually pay their way.
Yes.
So effectively, the point there was, when they benchmarked across their entire nation, and with other nations as well, they recognised that there was exploitation. And so that, again, sort of tips into the ethical company.
Yes.
And so I think that, yes, it is a massive debate in itself. There's more to it. But I think that ethical companies overall do need to look at what is deemed to be fair, market rate, what is fair value against what somebody should be paid in a given country for a given job.
Yes, so please let us know as I just destroy part of our studio. You may have heard a little bit of
Yes.
crashing there.
Yeah.
That
I think it was
wasn't-
very unethical of you to do that.
where do we buy this stuff from? That's
I
what
don't
wanna
know.
Well, what I wanted to ask was, I was going to say, please tweet us, send us a tweet. Our Twitter handle is at Mark and Pete. Send us a tweet telling us, what do you think should be the criteria by which an ethical company is measured? And also, we welcome your suggestions for further discussions, further subjects for our conversation. Let us know, what do you want us to look at in a future show?
Yes, more colourful conversations for the community.